Firstly, I'd like to ask you, what is it that you like about your work?
Well, for a bit of context, I've been doing this for over 30 years now, and most latterly with the luxury gin company Brockman's as marketing director. But I've worked in a variety of fields down the years: financial services, technology, health, personal care, many more. But thinking about it, there are probably four main things that really get me leaping out of bed to do this bizarre thing called marketing. And the first one is probably obvious, but maybe not, and worth mentioning anyway. It's the psychology of things. For me, the fascination, the invasiveness, the visceral intimacy of getting inside someone's head. Someone maybe from a different age group, a different gender, someone who speaks a different language, but discovering insights and using that insight to make products and services that are more appealing. And I think if you're vaguely interested in the human condition and in psychology and specifically, you'll love this part of the marketing world. I would say though, as a word of caution, when you do get inside somebody's head, please leave it the way you found it and don't steal anything. Now, there's another thing that follows on from that, which is suggested by psychology, and it's creativity. People sometimes forget that marketing is fundamentally a science. It's rooted in numbers and metrics and ROIs, but in some ways the metrics are a means to an end. Understanding those numbers better than your competitor means you can target your consumer better, and you can use creativity to create a point of difference and a brand proposition. Being creative and working with specialized creative people, designers, art directors, copywriters, can be a very, very fulfilling thing. And again, a further word of caution. The very best creative people you'll come across will be incredibly inspiring, but bizarrely, you'll somehow still want to kill them occasionally. I guess the other thing that occurs to me is the variety of what you come across in the average marketing day. In any given day, you'll face such a range of challenges, from choosing a font, the subtle use of language or color in an ad or a piece of point of sale, or whether your free gift should be a bag or a combined shoehorn and clothes hanger. I think getting your head into the space where you can think like someone you've never met, you're starting to get there. And the world is a fascinating place full of diverse people with diverse thoughts. And the final thing that really excites me and always has done about marketing is, I call it the battle. It's no accident that marketing and business language is essentially military strategy, campaign, etc. And winning a marketing battle is sublimely exhilarating. I think it's a primordial urge that goes back to maybe simpler days when we lived in caves. And it really is very often a zero-sum game. So there are my four things.
Okay. No, thanks very much. How did you get started in marketing?
Look, there are many, many different ways to get involved in marketing. I think probably the most important thing is do as much research as you can about the environments that are possible, the opportunities, and look for a structured learning environment. It's always good to have a balance between structure and actually, the more kind of practical learning on the job. Personally, I decided I wanted to experience as much of the world as possible and get as broad an exposure as possible to a diversity of human thought and experience and culture, and in so doing, being a better marketer. Number of ways again to do this, but I decided to have a second language and join a multinational consumer goods company, and they provided a good balance between formal training, job experience. More importantly, and selfishly, they paid me to travel the world and experience and learn from diverse cultures. So, excuse me, by the age of 26, I think I'd lived and worked in 4 countries. And by the age of 40, 10 countries on 3 continents. As always, I'm going to give a word of caution. It wasn't all beer and skittles, as it were. During this period, I caught several exotic diseases. I've been at gunpoint more often you'd think was likely, and I had personal involvement with voodoo. So it's not for the faint-hearted. But I probably do know more about the world than almost anyone I know this side of Michael Palin.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. What advice would you give to someone looking to start out in a career in marketing?
From what I've just said, you'd probably think have a good doctor, but more than that, I think there are, I think, 5 or 6 things. The world is exceptionally complex and competitive. And I think if you can put yourself in an advantageous position by leveraging other people's experience, that's a huge advantage for you. So I think one of the first things I think is very important to do as soon as you can is understand as soon as possible what your strengths and weaknesses are as an individual, as a manager.
Yeah.
Obviously play to the former, but fix, obviously, or at least manage the latter. That's a very, very important thing. And the sooner you can understand that, I think the better.
Yeah.
And similar to that, also understand and be introspective about what excites you and what bores you, because at the end of the day, we're all creatures subject to a level of boredom, and understanding what's exciting to you is important in maintaining motivation, but also picking the most suitable opportunities for you. You may get offered things that sound attractive, but if deep down you realize you might be bored and not particularly motivated by them, they won't be the right thing for you because you won't succeed.
Yeah.
Thirdly, this probably sounds simplistic, but find mentors. Try to identify as soon as you can after starting work more experienced people than you that you admire and trust. And they're the important kind of filters. Yeah. And then once you've got these people on board, don't be afraid of asking them humble and honest questions. And you'd be surprised what that reveals. Yeah. I think the honesty thing is probably the 4th thing I'd want to talk about here. Always, as much as you can, be open, transparent, and consistent in your dealings with others. I think when you get some seniority, it's always good to remember what it was like to be a whippersnapper. It's hard to believe I was a whippersnapper, I know, but these things are the only means to gaining meaningful trust. And without that, the only way you'll be able to get people to come along with you is to use threats and bullying. Those people are still out there, but you don't want to be one of those people. Another thing, and this goes back to a few years ago when I was fortunate enough to share the stage with the CMO of one of the world's largest FMCG companies, a company that's noted for being a beacon of marketing excellence. And he said something really interesting to me in a coffee break. He said, in our business, the CEO hates the marketing directors. He loves the CFOs. And I said, that's such a bizarre thing from your company. He says, well, it's really straightforward. He said, because when the CEO gets 10 CFOs in a room and asked them a question, they all pretty much gave him the same answer. But if he gets 10 CMOs in a room, he might even get 10 different answers. Yeah. So be aware that marketing should be grounded in fact. And judgment is a way of filling in the gaps where facts aren't available. That's all. Be also aware, linked to that, of the cliches surrounding marketing. Salespeople, when you come across them as a marketer, will think you're impractical and you're theoretical. So you counter that by making sure that you can demonstrate that in reality, you're practical and you're focused on execution and results. Finance people will, and again, it's a cliche and it's not true of everybody, but typically they will regard you as an airy-fairy creative type with no grasp of numbers or costs. So you counter that and you demonstrate your value to the team, the broader team, by being competent with spreadsheets, balancing your budget scrupulously. And you don't do these things just because they'll present you in a better light, even though they will. You're doing these things authentically because it's just the smart thing to do. And I think the final kind of piece of advice is just don't stop learning. This may seem like a far off, distant blimp on the horizon now when you're just starting off, but at some point, maybe around 35, some people sooner, some people later, you'll reach a point where you're getting paid a decent amount of money, people listen to you, and you're tempted to think that you know it all. And the best thing I can say is that you don't, and you won't. It's really important to keep on learning. There's a big difference between 30 years experience and 10 years experience 3 times. People my age, most of them missed the digital revolution because they thought it was for young people. I actually got on at the bleeding edge of that at an age when most people had stopped learning around me. So that's been a huge advantage to me. And digital is just one example. Just keep on learning.
Oh, that's terrific, Greg. Thanks ever so much. For people that are interested in what Greg's got to say, he's kindly offered to make his contact details available, and they'll be in the video description below. Thanks very much, Greg.
So, thank you. Bye-bye.